I never believed in ghost stories. I thought abandoned prisons were just relics of the past, cold, lifeless buildings filled with echoes of forgotten crimes. That was until I visited one myself. It started with a missing persons case. A man named Daniel Wilkes, an urban explorer, vanished inside the old Blackwood Penitentiary, a prison that had been shut down for decades. His last known whereabouts, a cryptic message posted online. There's something here. I hear whispers. If I don't make it out, remember my name. That was 3 months ago. No one has seen or heard from him since. Curiosity got the best of me. I had spent years debunking paranormal claims, visiting so-called haunted locations, and proving them to be nothing more than myths. So I decided to investigate. I packed my flashlight, camera, and recorder, determined to find logical answers. The moment I stepped inside, the air changed. It wasn't just the dust-filled stillness of a forgotten place. It was the feeling of being watched. The walls were cracked, covered in old inmate graffiti, but some of the words stood out as if they were fresh. Leave now. I told myself it was just my imagination. But as I walked deeper into the prison, the silence became oppressive. My footsteps echoed unnaturally, as if they weren't mine alone. And then I heard it, a voice, a low, desperate whisper that sent chills down my spine. Help me. I froze. The voice didn't come from my recorder. It was real. It was near. And that's when I saw it, a shadow moving at the end of the hallway, slipping behind the rusted bars of an old cell. My heart pounded. Rationality screamed at me to turn around, but something deeper, something I couldn't explain, compelled me to follow. I didn't know it then, but I had just stepped into a place where people didn't just disappear. They never left. I told myself I wasn't scared. I kept repeating it in my head as I moved through the dark, decaying hallways of Blackwood Penitentiary. The air was thick with dust, the scent of rust and mold clinging to every breath I took. But beneath that, there was something else, something rotten, like the faintest trace of decay that had never fully faded. I had read about the disappearances before coming here, but one case stood out among them all. In 1987, a prison guard named Elliot Grayson vanished during his shift. No body was ever found, no sign of forced entry or escape. One moment, he was walking the East Wing halls, and the next, gone. His keys, baton, and radio were later discovered near cell 23, a cell that had supposedly been empty at the time. The official reports brushed it off as an unexplained disappearance. But there were rumors, stories whispered by the remaining guards before the prison shut down. Some claimed they heard Grayson's footsteps at night, long after he had vanished. Others swore they saw a shadow standing inside cell 23, even though no one was there. And now, I was standing right outside it. The cell door was slightly open, hanging crooked on rusted hinges. A faint draft whistled through the bars. My flashlight flickered as I stepped inside, my breath hitching as I took in the sight before me. Deep scratch marks covered the walls, long, jagged lines that looked too deliberate to be from time alone. But what made my stomach tighten was what was scratched into the farthest corner of the cell. "I'm still here!" My pulse pounded in my ears. The letters were erratic, carved with such force that the stone had chipped in places. It wasn't new. It had been here for years, but the desperation behind it was still fresh. I aimed my flashlight at the floor. The dust was thick, untouched, except for one set of footprints. They led from the entrance of the cell to the corner, and then stopped. No sign of anyone turning around, no prints leading back out. A sharp crack sounded behind me. My breath caught. I turned, my flashlight shaking slightly as I scanned the corridor. Nothing. Just the empty hallway stretching into darkness. Then I heard it. A single, heavy breath, right next to my ear. I whipped around, my back slamming against the cold cell wall. My flashlight flickered wildly, the beam slicing through the darkness. But there was nothing, no one, except the cell door. It was moving. Slowly, agonizingly, it was creaking shut. I lunged forward, grabbing the rusted bars, my heart hammering. But the moment my fingers touched the metal, a deafening bang rang through the corridor, as if someone had slammed their fists against every cell door at once. The walls trembled. My flashlight died. And in that instant, as I stood in pitch darkness, I felt it. A presence, standing just behind me. I didn't wait to confirm it. I stumbled out of the cell, nearly tripping over my own feet as I bolted down the corridor. The air was thick, suffocating, but I didn't stop until I reached the main hall. My hands were shaking as I fumbled with my flashlight, hitting it repeatedly until it flickered back to life. I forced myself to turn around to check if anything or anyone was following me. Nothing. But then, just as I started to breathe again, I saw it. The cell door to 23. It had shut completely, and scratched into the rusted metal, clear as day, as if freshly carved, was a single word. Stay. I should have left after what happened in cell 23. But I didn't. Curiosity had its claws in me now, sinking deeper with every shadow, every whisper that brushed against the edges of my senses. And then I remembered something. A case I had read about before coming here. In 2012, two friends, Mark and Ryan, snuck into Blackwood Penitentiary for a thrill. Only one of them came back. Ryan. His story never made it to the news, but local forums and dark corners of the internet held his terrified account. He claimed he and Mark had been exploring the West Block, recording their adventure for fun, when they heard something. A faint knocking, as if someone was trapped behind the cell doors. At first, they laughed it off. Then the knocking grew louder, angrier. They ran. Ryan swore Mark was right behind him the entire time. He could hear his footsteps, feel his presence just a step away. But as they neared the exit, Ryan looked back. Mark was gone. The hallway was empty. No screams. No struggle. Just emptiness. Ryan searched for hours, calling Mark's name, retracing their steps, but it was like he had never been there at all. Not even the cameras they brought recorded his disappearance. The police dismissed it, saying Mark had likely run away. But Ryan never believed that. Neither did I. And now, here I was, standing in the same West Block corridor where he was last seen. The air was stagnant, thick with the scent of rust and something faintly metallic. Blood? I shook the thought away and stepped deeper into the hallway, my flashlight cutting through the suffocating darkness. The cells on either side loomed like open mouths, yawning into nothingness. I checked my recorder. Still working. If anything happened, at least I'd have proof. Then I heard it. A footstep. I turned sharply, my beam landing on the far end of the corridor. Something moved. A shape, just barely visible in the dim light, slipping into one of the open cells. My heart pounded. "Mark," I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. Silence. I took a step forward, then another. The air felt heavier now, pressing down on my chest. I reached the cell where the figure had disappeared and hesitated before shining my light inside. It was empty, or almost empty. On the far wall, smeared in something dark, were the words, "He never left." A chill crawled up my spine. Then my flashlight flickered, and the sound started. Footsteps, rushing toward me. I spun around, my heart slamming against my ribs, but no one was there. The hallway was completely empty, but the footsteps didn't stop. They were all around me now, echoing from the cells, from the walls, from beneath my feet. A suffocating sense of dread clawed at my throat. I backed away, gripping my flashlight as I tried to steady my breathing. Then something cold brushed against my arm. I recoiled, stumbling back against the cell wall. My flashlight finally gave out, plunging me into total darkness. And in that moment, in the silence that followed, I heard it. A voice, software broken. "Help me." The recorder in my pocket buzzed violently, static hissing through the speaker. Through the distortion, words formed, barely audible, yet chillingly clear. "I see you." My breath hitched. The voice wasn't mine. It wasn't even Mark's. I bolted. I didn't care if I tripped, if I got hurt. I just ran. The walls felt like they were closing in, the air pressing tighter and tighter. My mind screamed at me to look back, to see if something was following. But I couldn't. I wouldn't. I reached the entrance of the west block and nearly collapsed against the rusted door. My hands trembled as I slammed my flashlight, trying to get it to turn on again. When it finally did, I forced myself to glance back. The hallway was empty, but one of the cell doors had closed on its own, and scratched into the rusted metal, fresh and deep, was a new message. "He's still here." Mark never left, and neither did whatever took him. I should have left. Everything in my gut screamed at me to turn around, to get out while I still could. But something unseen, kept pulling me back. The stories, the disappearances, the voices in the dark. They weren't just legends. This place was alive, and I wasn't alone. Not really. I found myself wandering toward Block D, the high-security wing where the worst of the worst were kept. Murderers, traitors, the ones who weren't meant to ever see the outside world again. The air here was heavier, colder, thick with something almost tangible. I walked past rusted cell doors, my flashlight barely cutting through the thick darkness. Names and dates were carved into the walls, desperate messages from prisoners long forgotten. I didn't do it. "Let me out. He's watching." I shivered. Then I saw it. The last cell at the end of the block, cell 44. Unlike the others, its door was wide open. The air inside seemed darker, thicker, like a void that swallowed all light. And just beyond the threshold, on the filthy stone floor, lay something unnatural. Handprints, not one or two, but dozens, maybe even hundreds, stained dark against the stone. Some large, some small, layered over each other like they had been reaching out, grasping, clawing for escape. I swallowed hard. A sudden clank echoed through the corridor. I froze, my heart hammering. The sound came from inside the cell. I took a slow, hesitant step forward, shining my flashlight inside. The beam flickered, the weak glow barely illuminating the farthest corner of the room. And then I saw it. A figure, hunched in the shadows. At first I thought it was just an old uniform, maybe left behind by a guard. But then it moved. My breath caught in my throat. The figure shifted. A slow, jerking movement, like something unused to motion. I took a step back, but the air had grown thick, pressing against me, making it hard to breathe. My fingers trembled as I tightened my grip on the flashlight. The figure lifted its head. I couldn't see its face, Just darkness, as if light refused to touch it. But I felt it watching me. A whisper slithered through the air, barely louder than a breath. You shouldn't be here. I stumbled back, the flashlight flickering wildly. The air grew frigid, my breath now visible in the dim light. The whisper grew louder, layered, multiple voices speaking at once. You shouldn't be here. You shouldn't be here. You shouldn't. The cell doors around me slammed shut. The sound ripped through the silence, metal screaming against metal. I spun around, chest heaving, but there was no one there. Just the echo of doors sealing themselves one by one. The whispering stopped. And then the hands moved. Not the ones on the walls, not the ones on the floor. New ones, crawling from the darkness. Pale skeletal fingers emerging from the walls, the ceiling, the floor, reaching, grabbing, stretching toward me. Their touch was like ice, burning and numbing all at once. I tried to run, but something latched onto my wrist. I gasped, jerking my arm back. My flashlight tumbled from my grasp, clattering against the stone floor. I dove for it, but something cold and unseen pressed against my back. A voice, so close it felt like it was inside my head, whispered, "Stay." My fingers closed around the flashlight. I rolled onto my back, aiming the beam toward the cell. The figure was gone. The hands were gone. Only the empty room remained, the cell door still wide open. My body shook as I scrambled to my feet, chest heaving. My mind screamed at me to leave, to get out of this cursed place before it swallowed me whole. But then I heard it, a single hollow laugh echoing from deep within the prison. And I knew the prisoners never left, and neither would I, unless I ran. Now I don't remember how I got out. One moment I was standing in that cursed hallway, surrounded by whispers and unseen hands. The next, I was outside, gasping for breath, my body trembling, my mind struggling to process what had just happened. The prison loomed behind me, a dark silhouette against the night sky. The wind howled through the empty watchtowers, carrying with it faint echoes of something unnatural. I stumbled toward my car, fumbling with my keys, desperate to put as much distance between myself and that place as possible. My hands were shaking so badly that I dropped them twice before finally managing to unlock the door. I threw myself inside, slamming the door shut, locking it. Only then did I allow myself to breathe. For the first time, I looked down at my arms, at my skin. Faint bruises were forming where the hands had grabbed me. Cold, skeletal imprints that weren't just in my mind. They were real. I reached for my phone, desperate to check the time, but the screen was shattered. Worse, it was stuck on the recording app. The timer had stopped at 3:13 a.m., but the audio file was still there. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the play button. I wasn't sure I wanted to hear what had been captured, but I had to know. Taking a deep breath, I pressed play. At first there was silence, then static, a deep low hum, like something ancient breathing beneath the surface of the recording. Then came the voices. Not mine, not just one. Many? You shouldn't have come. He's still here. Stay. And then, in the final second, something that made my blood run cold. A voice, clear as day, whispering my name. I dropped the phone, my entire body going numb. I didn't wait. I didn't look back. I started the car and drove, fast, reckless, headlights cutting through the darkness as I left Blackwood Penitentiary far behind. But as I reached the outskirts of town, something on the side of the road made my breath catch. A figure, standing still, just beyond the reach of my headlights. Watching, I didn't slow down. I didn't stop. Because deep down, I knew some things don't stay behind. And I was no longer sure if I had truly escaped.